Hey everyone, this is Tom, and this week's character is Azhug Stonehand for Morton. Winner of the NPC theme week. Azhug is an orc, but a classy orc, and he was a joy to draw. A nice change of pace, as it seems every character seems to be. As far as this goes, a pretty standard approach that I took. Figuring out pose. I mean, getting a good sort of handle on this character. I'm going to go through the bio that I got from Morton pretty early here, but it was sort of neat reading about them. And personality-wise, Morton actually was almost exactly like one of my closest friends as far as temperament and description goes. So right off the bat, I had just a good kind of like, once I made that connection, I was able to sort of impose a lot of that sensibility into the character on my side, and I felt confident enough to just kind of go ahead and just start something like stance-wise as just being just practical and steady. And I mean, it's a very dry stance, but when I took a shard of the soul of my friend and put him into Azhug here, and I don't know, just sort of I don't know. Yeah, it helps. It was nice when it happens, and you can do that with any character, anybody that you're working on. Just sort of relating it to someone you know. It reminds me of actually, it was the exact same friend that I based this on. He was pursuing a degree in advertising, and in one of the courses, they had this talk from this old advertising vet pro guy, and he came in and he was one of the things that he explained was that if you're ever trying to make an ad or market something for everybody, it's going to be a huge flop. And so if you want to have some success and you want people to like it, think about one person in particular that you know personally, and market it explicitly for them, and try to just nail them on it, and then everybody else will like it too. It's counterintuitive. It's scary, especially for an advertiser, where it's like, oh, but we have to hit all these demos. But it's something that works. It's valid. It's vaguely connected to what I was talking about earlier with with the character, but like the way that I sort of connected is like focusing something for one person in an audience, or basing something on one person in particular to a really like precise degree, can and often will lead towards success, I'd say, if that makes sense. But yeah, either way, it was a happy accident. The description in the email is pretty much exactly my friend, to a T, and so yeah, it was nice. It instantly made me sort of warm up to Azhug, which is something that can happen with this sort of work. Is with concept art and character design, is sometimes you're just gonna hate a character. Like, you'll not want to have anything to do with them, and then other times you're just like, this person could be my best friend. I love this person, but oh well. So I'll go into the description. Being an NPC, he's not as robustly developed, but that's fine. So Azhug Stonehand. He's 46, male, orc, barbarian fighter, licensed mercenary. Azhug, or personality, Azhug, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's Azhug, so ZH I assume is zh sound. So Azhug rarely speaks when he doesn't have to, and when he does speak, he keeps most replies curt. He has a vocabulary as extensive as that of any learned human, but he prefers not to dress up his point. He always speaks honestly, and always prefers to be spoken to honestly, even if the truth cuts. He dislikes slippery, snarky, and overly arrogant individuals, but his professionalism is hard as iron, and he'll only openly rebuke subordinates of his own who can't keep theirs up. Azhug is a big eater, like many orcs, but prefers eating at a moderate pace in a civil manner. His favorite hobbies are lakeside fishing and wood sculpting. Background. While orcs are most famous for their ravenous... Let me just zoom in on the text here. While orcs are most famous for their ravenous wandering tribes, the world still has many living in civilization, though most of these reside in the multiracial trading hubs of the world. Azhug is one such and has spent over 3 decades working as a mercenary, now being a licensed leader who is allowed to hire and direct others to work. Most of the mercenary work is security detail, hunting local monsters, caravan guarding, and the occasional bandit hunting. He rarely ever leaves the continental island of Cambrelia. Physical description. Azhug stands at 6'9". He is a broad frame with a real strongman physique. No muscles, simply for show. Think Hafthor Julius Bjornsson, which was cool because when Morton wrote Hafthor, he actually included the Thurisaz or Thorn rune in the name, which is neat. It's actually kind of funny, a little bit of trivia here. Whenever you see a sign that's like "Ye Old Pub," that if you went back in time, you would never actually hear anybody say "Ye Old" or "Ye" instead of "the." What was happening was typesetters would use the letter Y instead of Thurisaz, which is the Thorn rune for it's pronounced TH. So really, it's THE instead of YE, but that's where the connection came from. So if you ever see like a "Ye Old Pub," it's still pronounced "the Old Pub." Although I don't know what you're supposed to do with the E on the end of "old." But yeah, strongman physique is a good way to go, especially with this sort of guy. Like, he's older, he's not flashy, he's not fancy, he's just really powerful and strong. If you ever get a chance, I highly recommend watching strongman competitions. Magnus and there are a lot of it that's on YouTube, but a really good body type and physique, especially for fantasy reference. He does have a layer of fat on top of the muscle, particularly on his belly, but it does not take away from how powerful he looks. So he's got kind of like a gorilla belly. I'm not reading the thing anymore, but one thing that happens too is that when you have like bodybuilders that do steroids, one of the things is that it can make your organs swell. And it either swells or it just collects fat on your organs. I think it swells, but the organs swell. So sometimes they get, if they overdo it, they get like this big, like gorilla belly kind of sticking out. That's not necessarily the case for for Azhug here, but that is one thing that can happen with different body types. So if you ever see like a character with, or a guy with like a big gut, but you can see the abs on the outside of it, that means his organs are swelling, because abs only exist visibly based on the fat content between the muscle and the skin. So if you see a big belly with abs visible, then it's the organs pushing out from the inside. But he also has significant hair growth on his upper arms, shoulders, and back. Don't we all? His default facial expression is a stoic and perpetually squinting one. His hair is thick and black, though receding on the forehead. The hair is mostly thick and spiky, but groomed enough to not be messy, despite its wild look. It doesn't grow any further than his neck. His face has heavily pronounced brow ridges, with notably big and fuzzy eyebrows. He also has a natural squint to his eyes, which, coupled with the above, makes it somewhat difficult to see his eyes when he's not angry. He has big sideburns similar to those of Wolverine from X-Men, but very sharp looking, so it basically... oh wait, I lost my spot. So it basically looks more like a continuation of his head hair rather than being separate facial hair, also like Wolverine from the comics. Not curly at all. His chin and neck is clean shaven. His jaw has a bit of an underbite, and 4 dull fangs protrude from his upper lip, from his lower jaw, 2 on each side. The fang closest to the edge of the mouth is larger than the one closest to the nose. In fact, here's a picture, a little image that he included. Similarly to that picture, Azhug has a more compact face than the previous orc I remember seeing you draw. That would be Davor he's talking about. He also has a... Davor had a long face. He also has a thick, slightly rounded... He also has thick, slightly rounded elven ears, like most orcs, which press nicely in along the side of his head rather than splaying outwards. For his clothing, I think we can go for what I described to my players that he was wearing the first time they met him during a formal event. Basically looking like Beast from Disney's Beauty and the Beast, like so, picture included. Though I'd like it to look more tight and uncomfortable on his frame, and having clearly been used for some time, and only kept clean of the biggest stains. Looking somewhat disheveled, like it's clearly not his preferred clothing, though it is for a formal event. He has a large two-handed great axe in his possession, like a Dane axe, but bigger and thicker, but with a little bit of fantasy flair to be sure. Some orcish runes would be neat, but no double-sided blade. Stats: Strength 10, Dexterity 12, Constitution 18, Intelligence 14, Wisdom 16, Charisma 8. And that was the description. So not bad for an NPC, nice and fleshed out. I commented in the last video how just rich and luscious people's characters tend to be. And I don't know like how much of that just comes through with the character building stuff built into the player handbook, or if it's just the talents of the people playing. But even I'm impressed with how much there is for a for even just an NPC, someone who you just pass around on the way or pass by on the way. But yeah, so that's Azhug for now. Basically, at this point, I'm just working out the main structures. The anatomy sketch was used for just general body and physique. Basing it off of Halfthor. He's the guy from Game of Thrones, the big, super strong guy. I think he's currently the reigning world strongman competition leader. I can't remember. But he's a very, very tall, broad guy. He's actually much more tall than typical strongman, which kind of negates his breadth. So he's almost more like a scaled up football player than a typical strongman type. He's also quite leaner. He doesn't have as big of a belly or a gut, but he definitely does have a higher percentage, like a body fat percentage, than a bodybuilder, like by quite a bit. He's got a round face and everything, but I think with being this sort of character and this sort of race, I think having a bit more of like an older, more like an Irish dock worker kind of face, something a bit more stone carved would have been fitting. But body type wise, makes perfect sense. Initially, when I started drawing, he wound up being a bit too humanoid, or like too literally human. So in order to fix that, I just broadened shoulders, lowered wrists and elbows, and I'm pretty sure I might have lowered his waist. I can't remember exactly what I did, but doing things like that can help break things up a bit. I find also lowering the cranium, that helps a lot, especially like I mentioned before, like having a larger cranium makes characters look too juvenile or too friendly. It's just a way that our brain associates it with babies and puppies, and it makes someone seem more adorable and more less threatening, more heartfelt. So shrinking of a cranium, especially for a monster race like an orc, it's a good way. It's just a good simple shorthand. And if you go and look outside of like Peter Jackson's films, you'll notice a lot of orcs have like smaller craniums and things, and especially in Warhammer. In Warhammer, the orcs' mouths are like as big as their rib cage. It's pretty great stuff. But when doing creatures and different races, like things like orcs and stuff, I grew up at a time like I've always loved creatures and monsters since I was like a little kid, just been utterly fascinated by that idea. But I remember always being so excited to watch Star Trek because it was about the future and aliens. And then, I mean, I'm not complaining. I understand why, but just how many of their aliens and creatures were just people with forehead prosthetics and nose decoration. And I remember always just being sort of bummed out where it's just some guy with a bit of rubber on his forehead, and it was always so much more exciting when it was like even when Kirk fought that like giant gorilla with the one horn on its head, and there, even though it's not very cool, but there was like that like lava monster back in like the old like the original series. Just stuff that really broke the mold, and I think it's something that I'm always I think it's just built into me now, where if I'm working on something that isn't deliberately human, I do want to break up that underlying structure, whether it's like the structure of the head, but mostly the proportions of the body. It's just like, you know, something that you couldn't just like fit somebody into with a costume and then hit go. And there are going to be times, if you're a concept artist, if you're working in film, where you're going to have to design something around a human figure. But there's a lot of impressive workarounds and ways that you can actually move around that. If you haven't ever done it, I recommend looking up like the art of Jurassic Park and seeing what they did with some of the Velociraptor prosthetics, and like how to get somebody standing and then building a raptor around a human body. And you know, there's so much stuff that you can do there, but if everything is just too human, especially if it's not going to be leaving illustration, if it's just gonna or 3D models, it is just so nice to just take a break from just standard human stuff. And it's all based on human stuff, but I don't know. To me, it's night and day. Like if it just looks like a guy with a mask, I'm just not super interested. Now this is, I think, the third in a row or so character where this process has really started to grow on me. Starting off with rendering, although so basically just starting off with you have a sketch, you know where everything's going to be going, setting that lightly, and then on a single layer going through and just doing all the due diligence of modeling all the form with volumetric and cast shadow. So any sort of rendering that bends around the form to just show what's going on, and then any shadow that's cast, like from those lapels, you can see there's shadow cast down onto his shoulder. And that's usually where I try to start off with stuff, is cast shadow and like the absolute hardest edge shadow that you'd need, like where basically any place where a shadow becomes a line is a pretty good place to start. And shadows do often become lines. The one challenge that I'm trying to get through on this on this sort of approach, and it's actually sort of, I'm finding it very tricky to get my mind around it at times, but rendering it not as a, I'm trying to get my mind to allow me to render it not as a black and white rendering of the forms, but just rendering of the forms themselves. It's kind of hard to explain. Basically, it's the difference between rendering out the image as if it's a black and white image, so like the jacket is dark and the shirt is light and all these values. But the way that I should be doing it is imagining the character just utterly just dipped in white paint and then pulled out and set to dry, and then, or everything is white, everything has no chromatic value or intrinsic tonal value, and then rendering those shadows, if that makes sense. So basically, yeah, like I want to render the shape of the jacket. I don't want to render the value of the jacket, like how dark it is. I need to do that part on a color layer for the jacket itself, where I can have, it just allows me to have more control in the future if I need to adjust something. And that's I'm going to be trying to pursue this method and trying to get my brain into that zone. I've got some theories on how to go about that next, but yeah, we'll see how it goes. But that's something, if you're going to be trying this out, that's something to be aware of. Like it could be a mistake to easily get done. As far as the costume goes, the description was perfect. Just Beast from Beauty and the Beast. I just get that right away. I can't remember the name of the era in English history, but it reminded me of Mr. Darcy from Pride and Prejudice. The outfit was very familiar. It was just sort of that general area with like the landed gentry and all those, the British. Although I'm pretty sure Beauty and the Beast is a French story, but with the same kind of jacket, like the blue jacket and the pants, the short pants and the vests and the scarves and everything. The picture that that Morton sent me was of Beast in his formal wear, which I remember it being a lot more complicated and realistic when I was a kid, but I haven't seen it in a while. But but it immediately made me think of Mr. Darcy and all that sort of era of British clothing and fashion. So I went and looked up that sort of basic era and based the outfit on that pretty much explicitly. It is sort of a one-to-one. Again, trying to reach expectations, and you don't want to break that bridge from my mind, or from the commissioner's mind and your own mind a little bit. You want to try to make sure that they're going to see what a little bit, something that they'll recognize at the very least. Oh, excuse me. But yeah, as far as that goes, costume-wise, pretty much one-to-one. There are a couple elements where I tried to bend it a bit towards mercenary and fantasy at the same time, but just really subtle. It is basically just like a formal gentlemanly thing. Like, this isn't him on a mission in a missionary's office, or mercenary office, or a mercenary role. So there's a lot of stuff. I mean, it would be so, it's sort of tricky where it's like he is this thing, but he's explicitly dressed not as the thing. And that's sort of a different sort of conundrum where it's like, do you then try to still hint at what he is, even though he's dressed not like what he is, or do you just forget any of that and just give him a costume? I prefer the former and not the latter. I prefer to try to give a few hints here and there about what he is, and not even hints where, like, I don't think anybody is going to see the 2 or 3 details that I included that are inspired by late medieval mercenary outfits and tie it to him being a mercenary. Like, I don't think anybody's going to be able to follow the breadcrumbs back. But there's stuff that, even just for my own satisfaction, just being selfish, wanting to include them just as little tracers, or like little just markers and things to show that, yeah, he's still who he is. His personality is always going to be there. What he really is going to be there. But it is sort of a neat kind of challenge. Now, another thing too is I wasn't sure, like, if they met him at a formal event, but his weapon is a giant Dane axe, did he bring the giant Dane axe to the formal event? And at first I was gonna say no, he wouldn't do that. But then I realized I just didn't want to draw a weapon, and I especially just didn't want to draw a hand holding a weapon, because that's like the hardest thing in art history, is a hand just holding a weapon, at least for me. But then I decided, don't be a coward and don't disappoint Morton. So you have to draw the axe. So that does help make him look a bit like a mercenary. But even moving forward with that, it's like if I was working on a video game and there's a character and everything and a bunch of characters, and there was a scene where you had to go to a formal event, and so the character had an outfit. I was around where that was worked out, and that happened during a game I was working on. But I think that you could easily just say, like, yeah, don't worry about it. Like, don't worry about who that person is. Just put them in a tux and throw them in there. It doesn't have to say that they're a fighter or a warrior or a mage or a mercenary or a nice person or an evil person. But it's sort of tough. It's one of those things where in real life, it's like you wear a tuxedo, and the point is to just look like you're in a tuxedo. But I'm super conflicted. This is the sort of thing where I would try both and then just give it to an art director. But if I'm the art director, I'd probably just open the nearest window and dive out. But yeah, it's like my instinct is don't cop out. Try to find the little ways, the little personal quirks, even if it's like cufflinks or how they've laced up their shoes or not, how polished their shoes would be if they're sort of like a more ragamuffin character. They'd have cloudier shoes or dirtier shoes, or pants. Do they have grass stains on their knees super subtly? I don't know. I guess there's a lot that you can do. Or even like how they've done their hair. Like, do they know how to do their hair for fancy events? Or are they like a teenager who just discovered hair gel and there's just way too much and they look bald? It's sort of a mess. I would say this is okay. I'll just put my foot down on it. The duty of a character designer and a concept artist is to imbue as much personality into everything as possible. I say try to throw in the hints, throw in the clues, do it. That's how I'm going to say it. Okay, but now that they're in there, in the reference given, if my brain isn't totally betraying me, I remember there being a stripe down the pant leg of the beast's costume. Actually, I'd probably bet all my money on it. But in this case, excuse me. I didn't want to just have just a strip of like gold or something down the pant leg. It would have been I was feeling it would have been a little bit too sterile, or maybe like a little bit, yeah, basically just too neat and clean and sterile looking. So what I did is I made a bunch of slits down the side of the leg where the strip would be, and then there's gold fabric underneath. So it is sort of like a gold fabric, but in doing that, it's based on the Landsknecht, or the Landsknecht. I don't know what they're called, but they were, I don't know how to pronounce it, but they were this rambunctious band of mercenaries from the middle of the last millennia, or millennium, and they were these flamboyantly dressed, just outlandish garbed mercenary warlords who would kick ass and take names and get paid and make bank, and they just had just the most flamboyant outfits ever. And a lot of the things that they would do is they would have multiple layers of clothing, which would have slits through them and openings in different layers so that you could see the fabric underneath. And that was something that they would routinely do. So a lot of reconstructions, excuse me again, and a lot of I guess artifacts you'll find of them. They do have all these weird slits, and I know there's got to be a technical term for them, but there's all these big sort of openings. Like, imagine like if you picture those old outfits from the Renaissance with the big shoulder pom poms and they're all these strips and you can see through them. It's kind of like that, but it's everywhere. So that's like one little clue to the mercenary stuff. There's also just at the bottom of his pants, there's like some red fabric that's sort of wound tight to sort of keep his pants together and his leggings up. That was another just super subtle thing. They're there because of the lens connect, but I wouldn't ever think of I wouldn't ever hope that anybody would connect it to that, if that makes sense. Like, it's there for me. Like, they're there because of what they're there because of what they are, but yeah, I don't think it's going to convince anybody, but that's kind of a good that's an okay thing. I was thinking about that this morning, where it's just like, it's so easy to fall in the same ideas over and over again, but if you just think about the individual character's story and origin first, it gives you answers to questions that you wouldn't have otherwise asked, and it just gives you different things to try out, where like normally I would have just had this guy's pants and just like capris, like they would just be cut fabric and they would just be open and flared. But looking at the mercenary outfits, a lot of them did have these wound up fabric strips, and just just using it's like being like, oh, that's a perfect thing, perfect, great, it's based in history, it's these guys, what they did, it's from mercenary culture, we'll just throw that in there. And otherwise it would have been even more generic. I mean, his outfit is quite generic. It is based on a very familiar one to people, and a very, like, it's familiar because of the Beast. It's stereotypical because of the Pride and Prejudice kind of outfits, but it's that sort of thing gets broken up a little bit just by those few little accent pieces from just history and reference and inspiration. Working on the face was a bit tough. It took me I did spend a long time on it, and I have been trying to spend a lot more time on faces lately. Just especially now that, I mean, this is week 35. This is the 35th winter, and one of the things that I was hoping to notice and learn from doing this project is where my same faceisms were. Where I've never like sit there and drawn this many faces before, trying to draw different people from all different walks of life, like just in a row like this. And so now I'll be able to hopefully see my own blind spots by doing this. So I haven't taken the time to sit down and formally like look and analyze yet. I'm expecting that maybe once I'm done I'll just see it and like maybe not look at anything for a month, and then it'll stand out and I'll say, oh my goodness, I always draw eyelids the same, and then I'll throw all of them away. But I definitely want to I'm putting in extra time deliberately to try and mix things up as we go. I mean, they're all still trying. I'm always still just trying to be as faithful to the characters as possible. But there are things that just creep up. There are things that are easier to draw than others that you don't have to draw. But in this case, it was a little bit annoying because when I was starting off the face, it was just like I wasn't pushing the features enough. I wasn't moving the jaw far forward enough. I wasn't sinking the eyes back in deep enough, or like letting the brow ridge be a brow ridge. But once I just accepted it and pushed the eyes back in and pulled the jaw out, it made it a lot easier, a lot more straightforward. I just wanted to, I mean, he is 46, and so 46 plus being an orc plus being a mercenary, he's gonna be pretty beat up. He's gonna be pretty hard-edged. The closest I can think of in human terms would be like Jesse the Body Ventura in his current state. Just like a head made of stone, a bit older. I mean Jesse the Body is quite a bit older than 46 now. I think he's in his mid-60s probably. But that's the closest I wasn't using him as reference, but that's the closest I could think of for this kind of head. It's one of the benefits of this sort of style. It comes as an annoyance as well, but just you spend all this time working, and it feels like it's taking forever. And I'm so used to needing to come back and re-render stuff and tighten things up and paint over what I've done before. But when you do it this way, you don't have to do that. So even though it feels like it's been taken forever, once you put the color in, you're almost done, and that is actually kind of fun. So it helps the time fly. Because you're working on all of this stuff, you think you're gonna have to come back, and then once you find out that you don't have to do that anymore, it feels like it's longer at first, but then when you're done, it feels like it was faster. Is basically what I'm trying to say. The only problem is that it makes these videos maybe a little bit boring, because it's less painting and more just drawing. It's sort of like watching someone draw with graphite or charcoal. Now, I haven't actually thought much about that, about which of these techniques is most interesting to watch, as far as like entertainment value goes. So if anybody has any suggestions or requests or comments about if they'd like to see me try an approach or a technique that would be just more fun to watch, that'd be fine. I'd be up for taking on requests. It's kind of scary, but I do that. So yeah, let me know in the comments. I always answer questions, and that, yeah, I'd be curious to know, because I've only seen a few other artists' videos, and some of them are kooky, zany, and I'm not that kind of guy. And other ones are just like very dry and technical and formal, and like the artist working usually just does such a consistent approach that it's kind of relaxing. I just like the more formal, direct approach, where it's just I just want to see what they did. But yeah, if anybody wants me to try anything, I'm definitely open to that. This is one of those dreaded hands. This is the hand I really didn't want to draw. It takes a lot of fixing and figuring. And hands are they're a nightmare. They're for me anyway. They're the kind of thing where like some days you just can't go wrong, and that's probably been about 4 days in my life. I've been able to just draw hands no problem. But sometimes they like make me not want to draw for days. Just terrified of needing to figure it out. I mean, usually once I just sit back and just draft it out, where it's like, okay, the wrist is here, the metatarsals start out here and shoot forward, and then the metacarpals, and then you just branch it off and build it up really formally. Just let it all be done. That helps. That's usually just what I do whenever I'm intimidated by anything. But hands are, I mean, a big part of like it'd be easy to just have a bunch of built-in hands that you can just draw, that you just like do by default. Like, this is how I just quickly scribble in a fist. This is how I just quickly draw a hand that's pointing. But for all of these, I'm always, for all my drawings, I'm always trying to do everything from scratch. I want to be able to just make something as it would be. And I think like hands are one of those things that they're so intimidating that it's so tempting to just to take the easy way out. And I'm not faulting people, and I'm not trying to say like I'm like some brave hero for drawing hands in a hard way because he's a smug jerk. But I really just want to be able to get it and just draw them no matter what, because the hand can just go into any position no matter what, and it works, and you can take a photo and you get it and you love it, and it makes sense. But I want to be able to like just draw that with hands, and I think like especially just like when you have characters that have like such difficult lives. I mean, being an adventurer would just be hard. It's like the hands are gonna be like tough and seasoned and heavy, and they're gonna like have a weight and a strength to them, and there's so much of the personality and the history of the person's hands that should be visible and like tangible and that you can sense, like in the, and they can be graceful, beautiful hands, they can be rough, dwarven, smithy hands, they can be troll hands and baby hands, but the hands are as much of a personality element as the face or the body type or the posture and the body language, and that's sort of that's basically like what I'm trying to get to. But yeah, it's just I don't know, maybe it's just I just see too much anime in my life, but too many people, yeah, I think it's just too many people just draw the same hands in the same poses all the time, and they're not really learning how to draw hands, they're learning how to draw an icon for a hand that represents a hand. And I mean, I see a lot of people make money doing this and drawing that stuff, and I guess it, you know, if it works, it works, but that's just not what I'm after. That's not what I'm trying to do. But yeah, do what you want. That's fine. As far as hair goes, it was basically, you know, spiky and vaguely neatly done. It's not too bad to depict. Spiky and slick back and sort of combed. Pretty easy and natural to do. I mean, it's very fitting for an orc. I think the description is perfect for like kind of what a classy orc would achieve. You know, thick hair, coarse hair. I picture it being sort of horsey-ish or horsehairish. Horsey. I don't remember the last time I ever said the word horsey. Yeah, I was a little bit. I mean, I've said in probably at least 3 of the videos how I think that shaved faces are something that makes someone, like, make a character look wealthy or noble, because it's just such a pain in the butt to shave, especially when you don't have like a Gillette razor or something. But in this case, because the description was explicit that his neck and chin are clean shaven, I was able to not put any too much hair on the chin or neck, but I did put a couple, but not because he doesn't shave very often, but maybe because he's just not that good at shaving, because he's an orc and he's squinty. So maybe there's just a little bit. So it's some of those things where it's like he's trying to be formal and everything, but you know, still an orc. And his arms and back and shoulders were covered, so in order to hint at his excessive body hair, I just wanted to make sure that his hands were nice and hairy, especially down even to like the tops of the fingers. Typically, if the tops of the fingers are hairy, there's going to be a hairy back. I guess even for an orc, the hair could have been longer and crazier, but that's fine. And even here, just sort of blending the eyebrows to the temples slightly. Not in any sort of drastic way, but just enough. And one thing that's weird about hair and body hair is that humans have the same amount of body hair, or the same amount of body hairs as chimps do. We just have, like, for every follicle that a chimp has, humans have a follicle in the same place. It's just that our hair is not hideous and monsterly. It's just our hair is thinner and lighter and softer. It's just sort of a neat fact. So now that I've done all the hard work with rendering and everything, which takes a buttload of time but is worth doing, just going in and throwing in the color. Like, this part is actually like quite relaxing and fun. And as you'll see, I'm a supporter of not worrying about getting the color right off the bat. It's more important to just get the color areas separated and broken down. So like everything of like color being colored up the same way, because then you can always just adjust it afterwards. This is another benefit of doing the probably the primary benefit of doing it this way, with the occlusion and the rendering done on a separate layer above the color, and not all together on one big sort of painterly layer, which is definitely absolutely one way to go, depending on your style. But this is one of the good things about digital art, because then you can just like change the color of anything ever that you want without needing to then go and re-render it. This is one way. And it's good in a production sense. I mean, it's production art. You got to be able to work as fast as possible to be useful, to be hireable. Especially if you're working in-house somewhere. It's a strength. See a gold fabric underneath, maybe some sort of silk. And this was all tough, really tough to figure out, the color scheme, because like the beast in the reference had darker sort of silken pants and a blue, like almost like a dark sky blue jacket, and those colors were I just didn't. To me, I played around with them, as you can see, but I could never make them work. They always just seemed off for the character, and too childish, too cartoony. They needed to be. They just weren't mature enough. And even as I looked into the outfits, I couldn't find any examples of somebody wearing the colors arranged that way. Not that that matters, you know, like this isn't a historical outfit, it's just based on one, and in the world of fashion there's immeasurable variability, so it was more about the characters. So anything that's like blue, a rich blue is a very good event for, or a good color for a formal event, so that's got to stay. So the jacket stays that way, and then everything else, the gold buttons, you gotta have gold buttons. The pants wind up being sort of like a tan, and then the vest comes back around to being a little bit more, pointed more towards mercenary later on, as I make it leather, something a bit more rough and tumble of him, rather than this sort of gold silk that I was originally gonna do. But it also needed like an overall kind of warmer, rich palette than the art provided. Oh. So we're just trying to get comfortable here. That's always good for skin. Always include variability in the color scheme, whether it's green orc skin, pale Caucasian skin, dark melanin laden skin. There's always going to be the variations. There's going to be like some people have like thinner skin around their eyes, and that makes more blood visible around them. There's like the blushing cheeks and the ears and fingertips and everything. There's always so much variability, and if you don't get that, then the skin's going to fall flat and it's going to look like a corpse, or like you don't know what you're doing. And those are both things that that you should avoid unless you're drawing corpses. At which point there is still lots of variation. There's just different variation. But yeah, typically with like an orc, I think an orc would be really disgusting and scary in real life. In fact, I should probably try to draw that. I think they would look different than they do in fantasy, if the descriptions were consistent. So like typically orcs have black blood, and I think that really that would have an effect on their appearance in a way that have not yet seen anyone manage to depict visually. So much of our skin is like pink and red because of the blood behind it. And if you had somebody whose skin would go to wherever it went to red, it would go towards black, like black, not like dark brown black, but like the black of carbon. I think that would just it would seem monstrous and disgusting and terrifying in a way, even if it's a subtle way. But I mean, that plus they've got green skin and tusks and red eyes and and they're 6'9". Yeah, they'd be scary. They'd be scary as hell. That's actually kind of one of the bummers about fantasy these days to me, is that it's not scary anymore. And if it is to be scary, it's got to be like freaky demons that don't even feel like fantasy anymore. But I don't know, maybe I can bring it back. I've got something in the back of my mind that I'm working towards. I want to make fantasy feel like an adventure again. Oh yeah, so just keep working on this, rendering out things. Typically, this is one thing that happens though, is once you've got the occlusion and it's like you've rendered the character as if they're dipped in white paint, so so you get to add the value through the color, but then you'll need to do another layer on its own for like highlights and rendering, and where you brighten stuff. You could on your rendering layer you could have it. I mean, it's because I'm not including the highlights in the occlusion layer. If I was doing it if I was working on it as if it was a monochromatic illustration, where on the occlusion layer I would include the value of this dark blue jacket and everything, then I would include the speculars and the highlights and everything, and that would be good. But because of the way I want to use the color itself to give myself more freedom, and the way that I want to be able to colorize the shadow alone if I need to, I then have to come back with a highlight layer, and that can be done as one. I usually like to just have one singular paint over layer, where I can just come in and do touch-ups and highlights and add little bits wherever I need to, and do stuff that way. However you got to do it. I mean, if you're new to this, or if you're a vet and you don't do it this way, try it out and try out different ways. Find time outside of work if you need to. It's been invaluable to me to be able to do this stuff and to experiment and everything outside of work. It's been a blast and a joy, and I've probably increased the speed at which I work by about 20 to 30% faster. I still don't have confidence. It's still always hard, and I think it's always gonna be, but that's okay. I had somebody ask me a question about the other day on YouTube about how did they word it? It was, do you ever feel like you'll ever make it as an artist, or like how does it feel to have made it as an artist and to have the abilities that you do, and or something along those lines. And I'm still afraid that if I'm ever going to make it as an artist, if I'm ever going to be able to like provide for a family doing this, I think about that. I'm worried about that every day, and I don't think I'm good enough. I don't think I'm good. I'm constantly aware of my shortcomings and my failures and my weaknesses, and then I need to learn about more weaknesses that I'm not aware of. And but I see that as something. I think I always say it's the fire in the belly. You know, it's like Adam Crowley would say, where back in the olden days, when they would get you to climb the rope in gym class, it wasn't to get you to climb a rope.
It wasn't to like show off how strong you were. It wasn't to like humiliate you or anything, but it was to show you something to strive for, that you weren't amazing, that you needed to improve, that you could always get better, and that you could get stronger, and that there were ways to improve yourself, and that you were aware of what you needed to improve yourself on. It was the fire in the belly. It was the, I gotta get better. I gotta become stronger. I have to become more able. And that's, I think, crucial to an artist. It's facing fear. It's fighting fear as well, and fighting yourself, and just never thinking you're awesome, and just not ever letting anything get to your head. Like, I know what it's like to be super proud of something that you do, and be like, and just think it's like the best piece that you've ever done. But I also know what it's like to come back 2 weeks later and to notice dozens and dozens of flaws in that same thing, and realize that you were wrong the whole time, and that you were just naive and arrogant, and that you're not nearly. So anytime that like just being however how many times in my arrogant youth, just growing up and being convinced that I was just awesome, and then every time I ever had that feeling, it would be just absolutely just obliterated by time and truth, and just just getting over it. Like, don't worry about ever being perfect. Just worry about getting better. And worry about not being a total a-hole about it. So yeah, not being awesome is something that you should get used to, something you should embrace, but something you should also try to conquer all the time. It's like the carrot tied to the stick, tied to the donkey, where like no matter how far they go, they're always going to be following. But man, they sure cover a lot of ground. They sure get a lot of work done that way. And even though the carrot doesn't get any closer to the donkey, they're both a lot further from where they started because of that carrot being in front of the donkey. So Dane X, good for woodworking. I didn't have enough time to go in particularly into the Dane X, but there were ones with like bigger beards and things that could droop down and stuff. But this one seemed to be like a quite iconic look. It was a particularly specific term to use, so I decided to try to stay loyal to that, and then just making it look a little bit stronger. I wanted to reinforce the head, because the shaft did seem a little bit thin, even though like a wood beam like that would actually be very strong, especially considering he's 6'9". But the extra metal down the shaft is there to reinforce it from impacts, and also if he's ever fighting people with swords and other axes and like pole arms and whatever, that the blades don't, because it's going to be getting a lot of action in that corner, or in that little nook up where the haft meets the head, and so that should be there to sort of block a bunch of those sort of sword hits and stuff. So here's some stains. Here's a little bit where he's needed to seal up a hole. You know, this is his formal outfit. He digs it up out of a chest. I'm imagining, these are my assumptions on the character. He digs it out maybe once a year, and he's had it for like 16 years, and gravy stains and things where he's tried his best to wash them out, and maybe some like age marks and dust and dirt on his shoulders. And his vest I picture being like sort of his warden vest, and it's tough and it's leathery, and it'd probably be able to stop a dagger. But anyway, this is Azhug Stone Fist, or Stone Hand, Azhug Stone Hand for Morton, for the free weekly character art lottery held every Sunday and Monday on Twitter at R&D Fantasy. Just follow me there and you'll find out more. Stay tuned on Sundays and you'll get everything. It's for your original fantasy pen and paper RPG characters. Think of like D&D, maybe even if you're writing a book and you have some and you have a character that you'd love me to conceptualize and draw for you, you can enter that character as well. Just as long as they're original, no video game characters, please, because you already have a visible representation of that character. This is for people who have been limited to the imagination. Anyway, this was a blast to do. I love drawing orcs, and I like especially ones that sort of break the mold. Nice having a classy orc. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope it helped.